In today's video, we have lots to discuss, including some updates on the Patrick Laine situation. GM Don Waddell has made some more remarks in a recent interview to kind of give us a better idea what might be going on behind the scenes and where things might be heading as far as the trade goes. Also, lots of discussion around John Tavares and the Toronto Maple Leafs. Some discussion about what a contract should look like. And part of the fan base really says, should there be one at all? We'll discuss that possibility and how things should play out. We also are going to take a look at the remaining unrestricted free agents that are still looking for contracts. And we also have a couple of big updates as well in the Avalanche when it comes to Mikko Rantanen's contract extension and the possibility of Captain Gabriel Landeskog making a return this season. We'll discuss all that coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, we have lots to talk about today. Let's get started first. I just want to take a quick look at some of the top remaining unrestricted free agents that are out there still looking for work. It's hard to imagine if any of them are going to get guaranteed contracts or if some of them are going to have to go on PTOs. And will some of them just not bother retire? It's hard to say how this is going to go. Generally, there is a crop of players every year that we kind of see this with. Comes right down to the wire for some. Some go on PTOs to training camps, earn contracts that way. And some just end up out of the game. Some go to Europe. There's all kinds of different things that we may see. So some of those top names that are out there still involved. Former Stanley Cup champion and Florida Panther Nick Cousins. He recently had a change in agencies that he was being represented by. Now rep by Craig Oster. Of course, Craig Oster is the uncle to Matthew and Brady Tkachuk, one of the top agents in hockey. So we'll see what happens with him. I mean, it's hard to say where things stand. I mean, when it comes to Cousins, he's not afraid to play a physical style. Obviously, in the last couple of years, he's going to earn himself a reputation of being one of the dirtier players around the league. So I do think he's got a few things that he probably needs to clean up, but at the same time, he's gained a lot of valuable experience in the playoffs. He's a cup champion now. I do wonder if somebody could find a spot for him on their fourth line or even as the 12th, 13th forward. I do think out of everybody that's left, he's got one of the better chances of landing maybe a one-year deal at league minimum, but there's not a ton of money out there for teams to sign players for sure, but there are enough teams with a little bit of space that I wouldn't be shocked if he's the one guy maybe out of this group that maybe grabs a cheap one-year deal, but there could be others. Chris Tierney is another name out there. Really, he's bounced around a lot. Of course, he started in San Jose, was involved in the Erik Karlsson trade, went to Ottawa. I believe he spent more years in Ottawa than anywhere else. But really, the last year or two he was in Ottawa, he really declined in his play, was not cut out for the role that they were trying to put him in at the time. Of course, the team was rebuilding. He ended up getting way too many minutes. Didn't help matters. I know it looked like he was dealing with some back problems too. I don't know if that's confirmed, but it sure looked like it on a lot of nights. And I know he's played for 2 or 3 different teams since then. But he is somebody who's got a good amount of experience. Again, could be a fourth liner, maybe a 13th forward. Sam Gagner still apparently looking to play. He's out there. You get Rem Pitlick as well. Again, Rem Pitlick's not as established as some of these names. It's hard to imagine. I think if Pitlick gets a contract, it would be at best a two-way deal. Veteran Tyler Johnson, I know who last year in Chicago had made reference to the fact that he wasn't really looking to continue playing for the Blackhawks. Wanted to try to get out of the rebuilding stage and kind of have a chance to play on a more competitive team. He kind of acknowledged that, without knowing how many years of time that he had left in the NHL, that he kind of wanted to get into a more competitive situation, and that it wasn't really a great situation for him personally. I don't think he had any issues with Chicago or teammates or anything of that nature. Just wanted to have a chance to play more competitive games. But he's unsigned. There was some talk that there was a few teams interested early. I don't know if maybe he priced himself too high or what have you, but he's got a lot of valuable experience. He's also been through a lot injury-wise, so we'll see. Kevin Labanc, former San Jose Shark, I know at one point he gave the Sharks a really good team-friendly deal, 1 year, $1 million, which shocked everybody, and I think he was kind of promised that following year that by then GM Doug Wilson that he would be looked after on a long-term deal, but that year did not go well for him. He did not get the long-term deal at San Jose, at least not that he was hoping for, and it's really been pretty steadily downhill from there. But yeah, I mean, he got to play a bit towards the end of their with a lot of their top players that are not there anymore, like your Thorntons, and obviously Logan Couture was a lot more healthy and productive at the time and whatnot. Had a decent run there for a bit, but really the last few years he's been a shell of himself. Last year, even in San Jose, the worst team in the league, he was scratched a lot. So that tells you. JVR, James Van Riemsdyk, still out there as well. Again, like last year, he played in Boston. The last couple of years, he played in Philly. Obviously, had a contract there for a while before that. His role was certainly diminished, but he was still found ways to be productive. He's kind of been looked upon as being like a third-line player for a little bit now, and he still manages to give you, 12, 15, 17, 18 goals, what have you, but Boston opted not to bring him back. I wouldn't completely rule out the fact that they don't consider bringing him back on a PTO. I haven't heard that anywhere. I'm just wondering. Obviously, they have, the Swayman situation that's looming, which I think they need to get that sorted out to see if they're going to have any money left to sign anybody else or not. But he's out there too. Mike Hoffman, Max Pacioretty, a couple other veterans. Hoffman, of course, played in San Jose last year too. And really, the last couple of years, Hoffman has declined as well. Pacioretty, coming off some major injuries, missed a big chunk of a couple of years. And last year, he didn't look like himself anymore. I'm not sure that he's got much left in the tank, to be completely honest. But I do know he did seem to get better as the year went on. But, I'm not sure somebody of Pacioretty's stature is going to want a PTO. Some guys I just find it's, not necessarily, not that they're being egotistical or anything of that nature. It's just, when you've had a pretty established career and you've had a lot of success, it's kind of hard to accept it at the end. Sometimes they'd rather just kind of go out with a little bit more dignity. So hard to say what happens with some of these players. Maybe we see one or two sign cheap deals, a few more go on PTOs. Will a few of them be out of the league? It's hard to say. There's lots of interesting restricted free agents still unsigned. Lots of interesting scenarios that we need to keep an eye on as well. You've got the guys in Detroit with Seider and Raymond and Bergeron. You've got obviously Seth Jarvis in Carolina. The Swayman situation, like I said, in Boston. Dawson Mercer in New Jersey. Could there be more offer sheets? It's possible. Hard to say. I mean, the rumors were circling a few days ago when we were talking about here on the channel, because there was talking to Flyers maybe going after, either be Matty Beniers, Dawson Mercer, or one of those guys. So lots of interesting restricted free agents on the market still too, and obviously they can't just up and go. So it's not quite as interesting, but there could be more offer sheets. Be curious to see if there's any more chaos here at the tail end of the NHL offseason. Of course, some news out of Colorado today. I know when it comes to Mikko Rantanen, there was some talk between Elliot Friedman and the author, one of the writers from Colorado Hockey Now, talking about a lot of optimism around Mikko Rantanen and his contract extension. The belief is that they're definitely going to get something worked out. I'm not sure how quickly it's going to come together, when it's going to be announced. It's hard to say. It's one of those deals that sounds like it could be just about any time, but it could also be a few more weeks into the season. It's hard to say. You just never know. Sometimes you get to a point in a negotiation where everything sounds very promising. You have a lot of the big parts kind of agreed to, but then there's little details that need to be ironed out and agreed to, and sometimes they drag on for a bit, so you don't get it quite as quickly as you're thinking. But belief is he's obviously due for another raise. He's going to be making somewhere around the McKinnon type level. Probably, I would imagine the Avalanche aren't going to want to go above McKinnon, so I suspect he'll probably come in a little bit just underneath McKinnon, would be my guess, but hard to say. I know what Friedman was saying is a lot of, speaking to executives around the league, a lot of rival teams are not expecting him to be one of the names on next year's free agent market, because guys like Rantanen, Leon Draisaitl would headline that class of free agents if they do not sign. But those two, amongst some of the other big names that might make it there, are not expected to be there. At least teams are certainly not banking on it by any means. So it sounds pretty likely that a Rantanen extension gets done fairly soon, and it's going to be a big number for sure. Head coach Jared Bednar also recently did an interview as well, and there seems to be a lot of optimism around Captain Gabriel Landeskog. Now, some optimism, and some of it you could look upon as being, I wouldn't say like negative, but just the unfortunate part is he's not going to be able to be ready for the start of the season. I'm not even sure, based on the comments, that he's really going to do a lot in training camp. It's hard to say. I don't imagine he's going to be a regular participant in camp. Maybe we see him out there a little bit. But based on what Bednar's comments were like, is that he certainly is continuing to push. He's making progress. They don't feel like he's going to be there to start the year, but they are optimistic at this point that he'll be able to rejoin him hopefully sometime early in the season. Of course, he goes on to say that, having players like Landeskog with question marks around him, they don't know what the status is around Valeri Nichushkin exactly. They know he's suspended and he'll miss at least the first little bit of the season, but what happens after that, it's hard to say. He has to be cleared to play in the NHL again. So is he doing everything he's supposed to be doing and all that? It's tough to keep, you don't always have all the information there. And then, of course, I believe the other player, there's Arturi Laine, I believe, is still questionable too. That may or may not be there at the beginning of the season. So, that creates a big hole in your forward group for sure. And it's tough to replace players when you can't really necessarily go into LTIR or when you know that they're going to be back in the not too distant future. Obviously with Nichushkin coming back, hopefully in November, that's what at least they have a kind of a target area right now. They have to have the space available, right? So they could probably start the year in LTIR if they need to, but it's not really going to be a long-term solution for them unless things with Landeskog don't progress the way they're hoping, and it turns out not to be as good of a situation. Now, there was some video circulating on social media today. I know if you follow my X account, you'll see it posted there. So certainly check that out. He looked good to me. I mean, yes, you could make an argument that he's not, he's still a ways away. Like, he's still not doing a lot of drills with other players per se, like battle drills and things, but watching him progress, and I've seen a lot of other videos of him skating and doing different drills in the past year, or even, a little bit before that too. Like, he looks like he's gotten a long way. You could tell he's putting more weight on the leg with the bad knee that's been repaired, and you can tell that he's turning better. He's looking better. If you haven't seen the clips of him before, it might not look like a lot, but I've seen a lot of his videos. A lot of things have been posted over the past 6 to 12 months, and I can say from what I've seen, there's definitely progress. Now, was that going to translate to enough to get him into an NHL game? That's difficult to say, and I can see why at this point the comments make sense, that they're optimistic. They want to be optimistic. He's an important player. He's their captain. They don't really want to move on from him, but at the same time, he's far enough away that it's hard to really put a lot behind it. So we'll have to wait and see where things go, but at least there's some optimism that before the season gets too late into it, that he's going to be able to join them. So we'll keep that story something we follow and see where things go from there. Some updates on Patrik Laine. Now, Don Waddell did another interview, this one on TSN 1050, and made some different comments that we hadn't heard before when it come to Patrik Laine. Of course, he made it clear that Patrik Laine absolutely does not want to play for the Columbus Blue Jackets. He was asked point blank, do you think there's a possibility if you can't get a trade done for him by the time the season starts or even by the time training camp starts, do you think that he would not show up and not report? And he said he didn't really know. He hasn't spoken to Patrik himself directly, but he felt that given the fact that he has 2 years on his contract with, a sizable amount of money, that he figures Laine is going to want to get paid. So he kind of figures that's going to be an incentive enough to have him show up and kind of go through the motions for a little bit longer if he has to get his paychecks until they can figure something out for him. But again, you don't know. The other thing that he did say, though, that is the quote that's kind of everybody's looking at now going, oh, geez, we didn't know that or we hadn't heard this before, was he said that there was a lot of things that went on in the locker room last year, and he just doesn't want it. So what was going on in the Columbus locker room behind the scenes that none of us really heard about? Now, we knew, based on what we've seen on the bench with Pascal Vincent, there was a lot of weird decisions made on handling of players and all that. But this tells me that there was obviously a disconnect between some of the players. Now, when you're talking locker room issues, there can be a variety of types as to what those are. I'm not going to speculate on it because I really don't know. But based on his comments, I think it's fair to say that if there was a player or more that he was having issues with, that he doesn't want to be around, that they must still be there. He must not be confident that those locker room issues are not gone, if you will. So, if there was a player that was causing drama and that player wasn't there anymore, maybe he'd feel different. That's just a guess on my part. I really don't know. But yeah, the Columbus obviously had a tough year. We know they did a lot of losing, which can take its toll on players. You factor in everything they went through at the beginning of the season, the whole Babcock thing, and then the switch to Pascal Vincent after the Babcock experiment didn't last very long, didn't even get to training camp. And then, Vincent was put in a tough spot. But like I said, as much as I kind of felt bad for him, I stopped feeling bad for him early on when some of the baffling decisions and how a lot of the players were handled, especially the younger players, to me, it was just absolutely baffling. Now, what was going on behind the scenes, it had to be more to it than just a coach, because clearly, he's not there anymore, and Laine is still very unhappy and wants out of there. So, I don't know. Waddell also went on to say that he's doing the best he can to try to find a deal for Laine, and he says that there's 2 or 3 teams that he's engaged with right now, and they're trying to see if they can find common ground on a deal. Obviously, like I said, he wants to move them. He wants to try to accommodate, but he's got a hefty contract. They're not real anxious to retain a whole lot of money. Sounds like they will retain some, but they definitely don't want to go to 50% if they can help it. And teams have been reluctant so far, given the fact that he didn't play a lot last year. He's been through the player assistance program, and the last couple of years have been tough on him, both from a consistency level and an injury level, going through the program. It's just, it's a lot of risk for teams to take on. So we'll have to see what comes from this. But obviously, that's the first we've heard about the locker room drama, and part of the reason why Laine does not want to be there. Now, the other big discussion I've come across today in the last probably 24 to 48 hours here is around former Leaf captains, which is weird to say, John Tavares. On one of the last episodes here this past week of Overdrive, of course, the TSN-based radio program that also, of course, is a radio version, has the video podcast. You can watch it on TV on TSN, listen to it as a podcast format, however you want. But a very popular Overdrive program, of course, normally has Brian Hayes, Jamie McLennan, and Jeff O'Neill. Of course, in the summertime, you quite often get maybe one of them at most, sometimes none, as they all take vacations at different times. This episode was just Brian Hayes and one of his sit-in hosts who appears there fairly regularly when they need him, Dave Feschuk from the Toronto Star. They had Eddie Olczyk, former Maple Leaf, too, as a guest. Of course, Ed Olczyk doing working for TNT now, asked a lot about the things. He talked about the Tavares to Matthews captaincy handoff and all that. And then the other thing that they were talking about, which I found interesting, was, which Hayes was talking about before even Olczyk came on, was how the fan base is kind of really divided on what to do here, because there's been a lot of rumblings about John Tavares extending, and we've talked about this in the channel in the past few days after that has come up. But at first we were wondering, does this mean that, are they going to trade Tavares? Have they talked to him about waiving his no move clause, or he's got 1 year left? Does this mean that pretty well that they have no plans to bring him back? And then there's been some rumblings that came from some NHL reporters saying they very much expect Tavares to be extended and that it may not be too far away from being announced. So there's been a variety and mixture of opinions out there, and we've heard a lot about the whole, the core and how everything's been on the table for the changes. You've got new CEO Keith Pelley, who's made all the comments, especially, we're not here to sell t-shirts, we're here to win. We heard about everything being on the table, and I'm not saying that there weren't changes. There was a lot of around the edges depth changes, but again, the core pieces to this team that's been there for most of them anywhere from 6 to 8 years, with Tavares, Matthews, Marner, Nylander, Riley. They haven't gotten the job done when it matters most. Is changing a letter from one jersey to another really going to make that difference? And Hayes posed a question: is never mind what should Tavares' contract extension look like, what number would the fans be happy to see him extend, but should he even be extended at all? Really, if you look at the fact that Tavares and Marner are entering the final year of their contracts, is this going to be a scenario where really should they not maybe wait? Instead of doing extensions for either of them now, what is the rush? See how the season plays out. I know Ed Olczyk on the interview part of the that broadcast was quite optimistic that the Leafs are going to take some steps this year and go deeper in the playoffs. Again, that's hard to say. That's his opinion right now. But I mean, at the end of the day here, they also talked about, would CEO Keith Pelly, from the ownership standpoint, prevent them from extending Marner or Tavares right now and say, no, we're not going to allow you to do any big contract extensions like that. We want to see how things go for a while before we really want to go there. Is there really any harm in it? To be honest, I mean, we haven't heard anything about a Marner extension, so I honestly do really think everything we heard earlier, that they're most likely going to wait, and Marner's agent wants to kind of have an opportunity to look at free agency first. So that may be playing out. And then when it comes to Tavares, though, we've heard the opposite lately. So, are they going to go there, or should they wait? I really think it would be wise to wait, because it's also fair to say that Tavares is getting a bit older and has declined in his play a little bit. This could be another real good time to get a look at him, because there's also word that they may be trying to maybe change his role with the club a little bit as well. See how that goes. See how another year's played out for him. How much of a decline are you going to see? Is he going to be better than last year? Is he going to be about the same? Is he going to take a step back? You have the time. Maybe they should take it rather than rush into extending him. And, really, I think for the fan base to be content, I honestly think it's going to have to be a pretty low number so they can get more flexibility to bring in, other higher end players to work with the guys of the core that do end up staying longer term. If Tavares and Marner, for example, did not return after next year, that would, especially with the cap going up and their contracts coming off, they'd have a ton of flexibility to try to make a big move or two, to try to bring in some other bigger pieces to work with the guys that stay, like, your Matthews, your Nylander, your Riley, what have you, to see if they can't get that mix they need to go after a Stanley Cup. So we'll see what happens, but I'd love to know your thoughts, especially if you are a Leaf fan. Should they extend Tavares now, get it done? If he's willing to sign, let's just say he's willing to go down as low as like $4 to $5 million, which is, half or less than half of what he's making now. Do you just sign that for 2-3 year extension? Or is it best maybe that they just pump the brakes here and just wait? See how this goes. You have the time. Why not take it? Don't get yourself into something that's going to handcuff you if the decline is more steep than you might think. Honestly, I think it'd be wise to wait. Yes, there's a number that I think they can get to and do an extension now that it's not going to pose too much risk. But if he's insisting on having a full no move clause and all that, you need some flexibility there. I just don't know if you can lock into that so that it's buyout proof and not tradable. And just in case, you've already given them that for 7 years. I don't know if you want to really go a lot further. Sign him, maybe, sure. But if he gives you the right number and you have flexibility to buy out or trade, that would be a lot better off, in my opinion. But let me know what you think, and we'll talk about it further in the comments. If you're new to the channel, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We'll keep you up to date with all the news, rumors, and analysis of all 32 NHL teams. Thanks for watching. I'll catch you next time.